Okay, so it's February the 12th, and the moon is in Scorpio today. And, you know, the moon in Scorpio kind of sucks, I have to say. Sorry for anybody who has this placement, but it's not, it's, you know, the moon does not do well, right? And so electionally, it may not be the best time. Well, whatever, you still have to do astrology videos regardless of where the moon is, right? But I guess it'll be nice then that when we have Valentine's Day on the 14th, the moon will be in Sagittarius rather than in Scorpio, at least, which is a bit of a nicer place for the moon to be, especially since the eclipses aren't happening in Sagittarius anymore. The eclipses are now in Scorpio. But that's kind of on my mind, the leading up to Valentine's Day thing. And from the point of view of Scorpio stuff, you know, that Scorpio likes to be private, and that I have to admit that, oh, you know, I'm getting into all this sort of intellectual philosophy and all this kind of stuff, and not really confronting directly the emotional, relational stuff. But for the most part, I find, you know, I watched a movie recently for the first time called My Dinner with Andre, which I thought was interesting. One of the things they talk about in My Dinner with Andre is that it seems like nobody can really can just be straightforward about what's going on. That you like everybody has to like act and behave in this weird way where they're talking around everything, and they can't really just whatever the whole thing about authenticity too, which is funny because I did this other video on my other non-astrology channel about the problem with authenticity, and I think that whole thing kind of relates to it. Is that people are they're the world starts to feel kind of artificial, starts to feel kind of fake, and often the kinds of things we have to do to communicate, or the different strategies we use to avoid saying this or that or the other thing, kind of comes out kind of weird. But at the same time, I don't think it's necessarily appropriate for me to go into my whole personal life just to a bunch of strangers on YouTube, or I don't even know who's watching this, right? So that's part of the problem, which maybe we'll get into in this video. But I was thinking to do something that's a bit of a change, in the sense that I have been specifically trying not to go into that much personal stuff in my video. And then, but since Valentine's Day, for me, you know, I'm the kind of person who has a Venus conjunct Pluto in Scorpio, and that, you know, I'm 36 now. When I was a teenager, you know, I was maybe much more of a melodramatic emo kid who was really upset on Valentine's Day if I didn't have a girlfriend or something. But you know, I have to say though, is that after having lived the course of my life thus far, that I have had, you know, maybe I don't always have a girlfriend. Maybe I have had stretches of being single, but I've had enough girlfriends and had enough relationships that I think it's sort of like, it's not really my place to be complaining about this kind of stuff. But I feel that the cultural milieu of the moment is largely defined by young men, the incels and stuff like this, frustrated, angry white guys and all this kind of stuff. And I just feel that, like, in approaching these topics, it gets skewed and it gets warped by this kind of environment that's kind of strange and unnatural, right? And that part of what I'm trying to do is sort of, and like, I feel somewhat alienated from this environment because of my own lived experience in my life. Does not There's a popular, whatever, the story that goes around the internet, a bunch of strangers posting memes. It doesn't What does this have to do with my life? You know what I mean? And that the internet seems like awfully abstract, removed from real life kind of thing. I don't know, whatever. But what was I gonna do? I was gonna talk about what I'm doing on this channel, anyways, and that I have to admit that there are certain things that people might be like, have not be so much of a fan of, because it might just seem like it's ideological, or that people go to politics, turn to politics so that they can avoid talking about something more directly and use politics as a kind of a euphemism, or just going to speak generally about what's going on. When in fact, a lot of what this is basically just me processing the last couple of years of my life, and whatever reading material is meaningful or relevant to with that, and getting an idea of where I stand and how I think about things and whatnot. But there's reasons why I don't like talking about the stuff. And I will like try to approach this in whatever way seems comfortable for me so that I can put this video online and not feel too self-conscious about saying the wrong thing and making it public or that people judge me. But at some point, there's something about Neptune that I feel is like goes with the hanged man. So in some way, maybe I am just like putting all my flaws and faults on display, and people are gonna roast me, or that I'm just like, exposing the sensitive things that I don't want to expose or whatever. But the whole thing. So basically the thing is that recently, before COVID happened, that I got into a relationship, and it was the first relationship that I'd been in a while, and that for one thing, the stretch of not being in a relationship had to do with getting through mental health stuff, being on medication that reduced my libido, and eventually getting off that medication, and then being more interested in pursuing relationships once I was off the medication. And so like there's this whole thing too about like for me having my own, because there's something about sexuality that is, there's something about what you call eros, right? That precedes just sexuality. That is that I've been thinking about recently. It's kind of come to mind in that when I'm talking about a medication suppressing your sexuality or your libido or whatever, it's not just that in a sense, because there's a James Hillman book that's really interesting where he talks about how when you dream, that dreams are related to also to the sexual response, and that there's something about the psyche or the imagination and the unconscious, and that is all kind of works together in a way that is also linked. A lot of people will talk about the creative process. If you're an artist, if you're doing creative work and that's what you do, that you need to, that the creative flow that has to do with, your libidinal energies, your creative energy, that's what you've got to work with. So that if somebody is an artist, a creative, that by having that drive being muted out, it essentially disables their creative process. And so, and then also to suggest that needs to happen to turn that person into just like a worker or whatever, is like, to me that seems like a huge violation of that person's soul, basically, and a kind of a crime against humanity in a way. And that's why I am like essentially anti-psychiatry to the bone. It's like so. It's like if you were to like do a cross section of my body and like peel away layer by layer, the core is a giant middle finger. It's going, "Fuck you, psychiatry." Just kidding, but that's kind of how I feel about it, right? But so, anyways, the point is though, I was involved in the anti-psychiatry movement for a while, and out of that, somebody introduced me to a young woman in my area, and we started hanging out, and eventually kind of got into whatever. You can probably just, I don't need to, but the thing is about this is that I'm starting to realize that whatever, there's the whole thing about disability and different whatever's going on with people's mind. Like I was trying to, in my process of looking for some kind of person to be with or whatever, like I just, sometimes you just have to, whatever, beggars can't be choosers, and you just go with whoever's, but I don't want to put her down though, you know what I mean? But the thing is that she very much did have a kind of a disability, and I kind of felt like I was not as disabled as she was, and I think that there's something of that reality that I've told people about this, and that I feel like I have to hide this and not be upfront about this, because that people judge me badly because it's like taking advantage of somebody, when I'm just somebody who has my own problems, who has difficulty making connections with people, who has difficulty making friends, and I'm just doing the best I can. And it actually, in some way, it works out that I think we had some good times, and we have, there's a lot of stuff that we have common interests, and interest in the same music and being able to do like in terms of trying to go around and also meet other people to be in relationships with, I'm actually, there's a certain, with all the problems, there's something about seeing who else is out there that's kind of like, well, that was, maybe that wasn't so bad, you know. In a lot of ways it worked, and maybe it was just for where I was, maybe that was appropriate. But there's something about there's a it did leave me, I have to admit, having a desire for somebody that I could, you know, have a different kind of relationship with, a different kind of interaction with. Or there's also this kind of thing that, like, coming out of those kinds of this probably has to do with the Neptune archetype as well, but like coming out of those dynamics, that like what your psyche is like is in some way determined by the people you're in relationship to and the person you surround yourself with and all this kind of stuff. And I realize that there's a kind of an issue in, well, I don't, like, Carl Jung always talked about that if you really gotten involved, like if an analyst really got involved with his schizophrenic patient into trying to work out with the, you know, therapy, not like this questionable Jungian get sleeping with your patient stuff, but actually doing therapy, there's a problem of like, if you were to pick up the mental illness of the person that you're working with, right? And or that looking at mental illness not as being just something that's enclosed within somebody's skin bag, but a relational process, and that the more you get involved in a relational process, the more you kind of, it's not just about this one person. It's like your own skits out is because you're freaking out because you don't have relationships, and your desire to be like, oh, I'm gonna talk to my friend about what's on my mind, and my friend just hangs up on me, and then so you end up just freaking out about it or whatever, right? Like there's things like, I don't know, I'm just trying to express what it's like anyways. But there's at some point anyways, it worked for a while, and then COVID happened. Oh, I don't even know if it was working. It was a kind of a funny situation. It's funny that I was at some this feeling like the person is probably not a good person to be in a relationship with because they're a bit of a mess, but you can at least sort of like look out for them and make sure they're not getting in trouble, and trying to be like, oh, hey, you know, maybe today we could just like not day drink or you know what I mean, or like trying to like suggest healthier things to do to try to push the person into living a healthier lifestyle, which is not really the, you know, it's the kind of it there. I have to admit that the relationship kind of like it goes into this weird territory where I feel like, am I a boyfriend or am I like a caregiver, or like what am I doing with this person in their life? And I think that's part of maybe the problem, because it creates a kind of a dependency, because I'm supplying the person with, you know, I'm kind of enabling them by being able to help them. But like, I was kind of coming into this through this point of view of reading all this stuff like R.D. Lang, and you know, we're thinking about we were talking about stuff like whatever, mutual aid and anarchist collectives and all this kind of stuff. But the problem that the main issue that I found with all of this is that the driving force that makes it go is kind of just libidinal stuff, and that the whole thing about like an anarchist collective starts to be like, oh, I just want to fuck a bunch of people and not be committed, and like we can call that our anarchist collective, and whatever guy's giving me beer is my mutual aid, and it's like, that's not really supportive. That's just a bunch of sleazy guys who want to sleep with you. That's not a fucking anarchist network. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, or I don't know, that trying the idea of like being like, I'm going to create a mutual aid support network, but I'm just, if like, I also don't want to slut shame or something like that. But it's like, as being from my position as a guy, and I'm trying to make, if I was to be like, okay, like let's have a community of people that are all wacky and creative and interesting, and it's like there's got to be something other, like if it's just trying to fuck people, like you can see how it breaks down really quick, and then people just end up being couples and or whatever. Like it's not like, or having a weird like sex cult, like that's how weird sex cults start, basically. You know what I mean? And so that's the kind of the issue of like, or why, you know, you work that stuff out rather than sleeping with your patients or something like this, right? Or like, but me not being I don't know, I'm not a professional psychiatrist. I'm a guy looking for friends. I'm a guy looking for, you know, belonging. I'm looking for love and attention and stuff like this, right? I don't know. So it feels like a bit of a mess, but that's kind of where we're going with all this. there's another thing about this, which was like the issue about substance use. And I'm at the point right now where it leads into another conversation that I want to have, another story, but I don't know if I'll get into all of this. But when I met this person that I was in a relationship with, at the time of meeting the person, my substance use was like I was using a vape, and I wasn't drinking, and I wasn't smoking tobacco, and I wasn't smoking weed, and I wasn't doing any drugs. I was only vaping nicotine. But then this person was using marijuana, they're using alcohol, and who knows what else they might party with on occasion. Who knows, right? But the point was that quickly, first of all, I started drinking a bit, and then it wasn't that long while we were hanging out that at some point in time there's a situation where I said, fuck it, I haven't smoked weed in years. Like I abstained from years. Like that's the whole thing. For people with mental health problems, I have to say, sometimes it's a really good idea just to stop smoking weed. And so at some point in time I smoked some weed with this person, and I guess if I do post this, I guess I'm admitting that that I got back into smoking weed, and now it'll be out there on the internet. But the point is, though, that I'm talking about what happened a few years back, and since then I've kind of abstained, but then I've kind of flip flopped a bit. And what I'll keep going as the story goes, right? To try to explain where I'm at with it right now, but the point is that when you get involved with people and they have all these bad habits, this is the same way that, like I was saying with Jung, that maybe that the mental illness of a person can affect you by being in such close proximity, but then also you start to end up picking up all the person's habits, all their bad habits as well. And it's sort of like this whole thing about whether the relationship is a good influence or not, or like, but at some point in time, I don't know, I just had to go with it, or at least it just seemed like the thing to do at that point in time after spending all this time living at my mom's house and being sober and all this kind of stuff. Like, I don't know, why don't I hang out with a cute girl and drink some beer and smoke some weed and have some fun? I'm kind of overdue for that. That's kind of what I felt like, right? So it's not so bad, is it? And like, there's nothing really wrong. There's nothing wrong with any of these things. It's just when it becomes an unhealthy, addictive kind of thing, basically, right? But then the whole problem was that while I was living with her in Vancouver Island, and COVID happened, I was stressed out about COVID. It put a lot of pressure on the relationship. It made the relationship already had its difficulties. COVID just made it more difficult. And then in order to cope, then I took to drinking more heavily. And then I don't know if that contributed to my health problem that I ended up having later. But eventually, there are certain things that I was just kind of like maintaining it, but not really being that happy in the relationship, kind of wanting a change, but just keeping it going and the whole thing is being supportive. Like, this sucks, this COVID thing, this sucks, the fact that you're mentally ill, this sucks the situation, but I'll be there and I'll be supportive and I'll get through it. But I wasn't really happy and I was just drinking a lot. And then eventually it came to the point where the cat got into an accident, the cat had his tail ran over, and then I was all stressed out about looking after the cat, and then at that point in time, my girlfriend was like, I'm going to look around for other houses to live, where they don't have to live with you, and I'm like, well, fuck you. I'm just kidding, but like, it felt like that. It was like, what? Like, I have to deal with this poor cat and his broken tail, and everything, and like, and you're running off to go, and like, I need, and then like, the land, I don't know, I basically then she was like, okay, I'll stay, and I'm like, and I basically told her, I don't want to stay with you. Like it's just like, not only is it like not like is this situation like just depleting all the demand for support and care and attention, just depleting me, but as soon as there's something else that needs support, care, and attention, like the cat now needs to have some care and attention because it's got its tail broken, then there's no support for me in looking after the cat. You know what I mean? If you're giving care to somebody and then another poor creature needs care, the other person will just fuck off because oh, I guess he's busy, I guess he's not there to give me unlimited attention and pity and concern, so I'll just fuck. It's like they're, and that's what, I don't know. I just feel like my friendships just become these like leeches, these energy leeches, draining, and it's like I'm really do not want to be, or if I have another relationship, I don't want it to be like that, you know? And, I don't know. Maybe I'm not even. Maybe by the way I'm communicating it is not completely representative of the reality. I'm just doing my best to express how I'm feeling about it right now, anyways. But so that was kind of like the end of the relationship. It was kind of catalyzed by the cat breaking its tail and me having to like put more care and attention into the cat. The landlord, the guy who actually owned the cat, wasn't even my cat. The guy who owned the cat was kind of disappointed that we didn't just fucking kill the thing, right? Put it out of its misery. Like, poor me, the kid. I have to be compassionate to this poor cat because there's a whole history too about how treating animals and dogs getting ran over and stuff like this that I won't get into, but there's a lot of traumatic animal shit that goes with this, and like I'm not gonna go there. It's not really my business, but I was again you get involved in other people's stuff because you look after their animals and stuff, right? So like there's out of all this, eventually the girlfriend ended up moving out to a different place, and then I stayed there with the cat, and the guy who owned the cat came back to live there, but then he was just an alcoholic, and then all of his friends would come over and they would drink and do drugs and get into fights because there was like a couple who couldn't there's a guy living in the native reserve, and the native reserve, I think the native reserve, from the sound of it, it's much more of a kind of a tightly knit kind of community if you're natives living on a reserve in Vancouver Island. And when I guess the situation is if you bring your white girlfriend and you guys have domestic arguments and piss everybody off with your yelling and screaming, they'll kick you off the reserve and you have to go to your white guy friend's house and fight about it there and piss me off. So like the whole thing is like, okay, I mean, I'm just describing the situation I was forced to deal with in that. And it's also, I have to admit, downtown Nanaimo is a ghetto, and I'm reading Gabor Mate's The Myth of the Normal right now, and it's like, this is the Neptune thing, is that the whole influence of the environment, of all the junkies and the meth clinic and the people fighting and violent, and people like, angry teenagers will just jump random old people and beat them up, and it's just like the best environment to be in, living in the ghetto. What can I say? Even if it's the Vancouver Island ghetto, right? And then when the ghetto is in your own house, when the ghetto invades your own house and you got people fighting in your own house, and then so out of this, in this stressful situation, I'm trying to make astrology videos and I'm trying to be an astrologer, and I end up somebody takes the same astrology course as me, contacts me and says, hey, do you want to hang out? And then in contrast to all this stuff that I've got going on, this person who approaches me is somebody who used to have addiction problems. I won't go into all their history, all their business. I'll leave a bit of privacy, okay? I'm keeping this private, not going into all the details, but I will say that this person was sober, a recovering addict, and they'd been through some shit, and they also had an interest in astrology. And hopefully there's enough people, it can just be vague and I don't have to be all, whatever. The whole point is I don't want to, whatever. I'm trying to, whatever. Hopefully this is appropriate. Anyways, that's all I'm trying to say. And in the situation, there was something about this person, I have to admit, I immediately developed a crush on them. I was trying to just be neutral, but in the person like being like, oh, do you want to hang out and like meet, and I was trying to go into it neutrally, but even just planning it, I just had intuited that I was excited to meet this person and stuff like this, and that I kind of got a crush on them, and that I won't go into all the details. We hung out a couple of times, but it didn't go anywhere. But part of the reason it didn't go anywhere was that this person basically decided that she wasn't going to even see boys at all for a whole year, and that she was really not using drugs, not using, all these pleasure-seeking things. And I'm like, I don't know. I was just kind of like, oh, well, this is... it was kind of frustrating because it was obviously not going to go anywhere if that's from the get-go of what she was doing. But it's, that's the problem, I think, about having spiritual friends, is there's a certain... Spirituality has to do with a certain form of asceticism or a certain form of self-denial or a certain form of imposing limitations on you, like if you're practicing Lent or something, or that you're intentionally working within sort of restrictions and limitations, and also if you're recovering from addictions and stuff like that, and having kind of control over your environment, and it's like I get the whole thing, and where I was kind of just in a mess at that point at the time, and where I was surrounded by alcoholics screaming at each other basically. And but in that thing, I decided, I was reading Deleuze and Guattari, and I was reading that, like, they had this idea that was like, just because I'm surrounded by a bunch of toxic alcoholics doesn't mean that I have to be that way myself, and in such a way that I can see that it's obviously not very good what's going on there, and that I can obviously see that there's something about this other person and what they're kind of going for that seems like more of an ideal to aim for. And then in this, I sort of resolved in that moment that it's as a kind of like, it was clear what I had to do was not be sucked into the lifestyle of drugs and alcohol and getting lost in whatever the ghetto lifestyle and or whatever. And that, so I at that moment resolved to stop. I would stop drinking alcohol, and I would stop smoking cigarettes. Well, I wasn't really smoking. I guess I was sometimes smoking. I don't know. He was using a vape or whatever, sometimes tobacco and alcohol and stuff, and marijuana or whatever. I decided I would go completely sober, and that I would, even though I was living basically with a whole bunch of people that did drugs and alcohol, I would be like straight edge, and then use the fact that these people were like kind of like disgusting about how fucking gross and hungover they were as like motivation to be like why I would want to stay sober. But it wasn't really that good, because it was like motivated to be sober because I really didn't like the people who were around me, and that there's this person that I kind of idolized in a way. Well, I don't know if idolizing is the right way, but in the stark contrast between these alcoholic people and the person who used to be like that, who's trying to recover, that I thought that was a better way to go. But the recovery is a very individualistic thing. Like, you're not supposed to get into relationships when you're in recovery and all this kind of stuff. And then I remember, talking to a bunch of people who have also been through addictions recovery, and about how you look for sex and relationships to give you a thrill or something like this. But the thing is, it's like, I sort of have to ask myself these questions, because I'm like, well, I can see in one way that the relationship between the people who would fight in that house was an unhealthy dynamic, right? And that they're caught in a kind of addictive pattern using drugs and alcohol in an unhealthy relationship dynamic, and whatever, right? And so that I could see how the relationship dynamic could feed into that. But I was kind of like, I don't know. The point was that it was just not available, that the person that I met that I had a crush on, and the alcohol, the alcoholics were just my landlord roomie's friends, right? And like, I don't know if I should have tried to make friends with them, but to me, I think it's better just to be like, well, maybe it's better just to instead of being so eager to be connected, to be part of something and all this, to just do what's right for me, and then hopefully then some people will sort of like, as I do what's right for me, the people will sort of accumulate, and sort of the community will develop on its own or whatever, right? But unfortunately, like, I don't know. Well, I'm only 36, at least. I guess, like, when you're 36, it seems old compared to looking at these, like, 20-year-olds and the young people and stuff like that. But in the grand scheme of things, but I don't know. For me, all I can really do is have a kind of a faith or something, or hope or something. Because my own life has just it sucks for community. It's like, I don't know if that's my fault. Maybe I'm too much of an individualist. Maybe I am too, I'm too opinionated or something. I don't know. I don't get it at all. I'm confused. Anyways, but, my point, though, is that, okay, to continue my story, though, is that after I had this idea to be completely sober, based on that it's to not get pulled into this sort of unhealthy situation or whatever. But I ended up basically just probably the tension that was created in trying to live like that got me kicked out of this guy's house. And I think he made up some reason to kick. He got really drunk when he told me I had to leave and made up some bullshit that probably wasn't even real, because I don't think this guy was able to actually confront whatever the issue was, at least not in a way that was sober and clear-headed. So like, it's like, but then if you can't even talk about your living situation without getting like blasted first, like that's all probably a good example of why it's not a good living situation to be in. So, I mean, I don't know. I feel like it was probably for the best that I moved out of there. But then when I moved back in with my mom's, I was moved back with my mom's, and I was not happy about not being able to find a different place to live, or not happy about. But the thing though is that more recently been getting sort of like, my intuition is telling me that like living here with my family, although I don't really know, I've got a couple people I know maybe in Ladner, but nobody that I really hang out with, right? I don't hang out with anybody in Ladner. I don't have any social connections in this community. And that there's nothing really tying me to this specific place other than the fact that my family lives here. But the thing is that, as I would say, my mom is getting older, and that she's less able to take care of, like, she wouldn't probably be able to live here completely on her own and do all the things to take care of the house and all the property and all this kind of stuff, and that she probably needs people to help her out a bit. And that there's this whole, I don't know about, we have this whole structure where people are supposed to go off, like I'm supposed to go and work a job and have a business, and so I can make a bunch of money and then pay for caregivers to look after my, well, I mean, she's not even that far gone yet, I guess that's not really the point, but there's this thing about like, we're like, have people being put off into old folks' homes, or put it like, or it's same as mentally ill people being in group homes, in that like, rather like trying to destroy a family structure for the sake of a kind of a paternalistic state system that has everybody in like little like hospital jail cells or something like that. That I think that I don't know if, it feels like this, I'm stuck in this family structure where I'm like a little, like my like brother and sister and mommy, and we're like little teenage kids, and mommy knows best, and I'm like, I'm an adult, like, and that's like the whole frustrating thing about the last, ever since I was in my mid-20s and I had this psychotic break, was that I was like, asserting my independence in the world and doing what I, trying to build my own life, and it was really frustrating to have to live with my parents, because that's not what I wanted to do at all, really, but the circumstance of it just necessitated it. Or in a way, I don't know, it's more of a conversation to get into now, but I really felt like I had to do that, and that and also this whole, I'm kind of confused, it had to do also with not moving back to my parents' house, not living on the downtown east side, not living in the ghetto, and that if I'm putting my mental health back together, I'm starting to realize is that living in a slum, living in an environment with all that poverty and pain and suffering is just, even if it's not personally, it's like it affects you on some level, and at some point in time it's going to start seeping into your life and stuff like that, and it's going to be affecting you, and that it seems, but to run away to your mom's house, it doesn't seem like a solution either in some way. I don't know, but out of all these problems, I don't know. What can I say? This has been half an hour anyways, so I guess one of the things I was trying to say though is that like the sobriety and stuff like that is that by trying to do this thing about living completely sober, is that it turned into this thing where it was like my body was trying to kill me or something. So it's like, I don't know, I'm not really sure if that's exactly the way to go, or that there's some kind of like that, I don't know, like I don't want to blot myself out with drugs and alcohol for the sake of having friends. Like, if I annihilate myself with enough alcohol, then I can hang out with enough other annihilated zombie people and just be like everybody else in the downtown east side. You know what I mean? Like, that's not the way to go. Um, and like part of this too is that there's an issue about my ex-girlfriend using drugs and alcohol to cope. And then apparently she was really getting in trouble, getting way too drunk over Christmas time. She ended up in the psych ward, and I've blocked her phone. I had to block multiple cell phones of her, and then like her sending me messages that she's committing suicide, winding up in this. It feels like emotional blackmail to me, is what I'm trying to say. And that like by getting involved with her seems to only pull me into situations where I'm immersed in like really toxic environments and stuff like that. And so, but it's like I'm kind of like I'm like lonely, and it's Valentine's Day, and she's asked me to go out and have like hot chocolate with her and stuff like this. But the only thing she's been able to communicate in the last couple of months is that she doesn't develop healthy coping mechanisms. She just gets blasted and is at odds with her family, and she's dating some old boyfriend, but they are hating each other and fighting, and so she's trying to run off from some shitty relationship to me, and it's just an off. Like, I don't really want to get involved in it, you know, but it's just like. And then I don't do the good thing. Is this gossiping too much? Is this putting too much personal information on the internet or something? But like I don't know. I'm just going into like I'm just dealing with the circumstance that like going into Valentine's Day, and it's like that. I think it's like sometimes it's better being more mature now, being 36 years old. I can see that, you know, like maybe it's better to be single sometimes. Maybe it's better not to get involved in messy, toxic relationship dynamics. Maybe it's not good to, you know, sacrifice your clear-mindedness and sobriety to go down some downward spiral of lust and depravity and filth and terrible things. You know, like maybe not. Yeah, maybe not this time. You know, let's whatever, right? I don't know. Is this the right thing? Is it the right stuff to be putting on the internet? I don't know. But like that, the part what I have to say though is that when I started making astrology videos again, it was only a couple days after making astrology videos that I get the message from my ex that she tried committing suicide. Right. And it's like and then like when I make astrology videos, my old friends that I don't talk to anymore start sending me messages and stuff like that, and it's like I don't know. Well, I mean, it could like that would maybe be a good thing. You think if you're your old friend, but like again, I don't want to get me and my the Scorpio never forgets. You know what I'm trying to say? I don't whatever. Maybe this is probably. Is this a dumb video? Is this not a good astrology video? Should I delete it? I'm trying to at least whatever. I'm trying to at least to maybe express my Valentine's Day Venus Neptune problems rather than just I don't know. Maybe I should keep them to myself. Maybe I should. Maybe, I don't. Whatever. I don't know.